It has been quite some time since Riot has done some major balancing to the core weapons in the game. And even though there have been some necessary changes at the start of episode 3, it seems like some weapons continue to feel unbalanced and bad for the game. What is going on, ProGuides family? It is your host Sergeant Frost, and today we have the 5 most low-key OP guns in the game right now. We're going to talk about what makes them strong and how they can feel unbalanced at times as well. And if afterwards you want to learn how to master each of these guns as well as many of the other guns to their maximum potential, our Radiant and Immortal level coaches on ProGuides.com are more than eager to share with you their tips to dominate in game. Whether it's to give you specific tips to master each gun, or help you master the fundamentals and unleash your potential as a player, our coaches are trained to help you at any level. So if you're serious about climbing the rank ladder this season, come check us out with the link in the description. Now let's get started. Just a quick disclaimer, this list that we have put together today is in no way saying that these guns in particular are downright broken. This list comprises guns that have some unbalanced factors in the first place, and Riot has done little to nothing to curtail their power levels in game. Some of these factors include how they break past their niches, and how they dominate in certain situations completely, or how they're just too cheap and too good for general use. Keep in mind that these are our opinions on the situation, and that whether at the end of the day they actually need balancing or not, we want to start a discussion on whether the current state of the gun balancing is fine as is. Without further ado, let's start this list off on an old-time favorite, and a meme in the Valorant community at this point. And if you guessed that that gun I would talk about first is a classic, then you're spot on. First things first, the classic is a very powerful gun for being the only free gun in the game. The classic is a consistent shooter, it's reliable, and it packs a lethal punch. Both the left click and the right click fire modes are devastating in their own way, so let's talk about why. The first thing that makes the classic insane lies in its damage numbers. The headshot damage numbers for the classic are quite high for a free gun, which means that the classic is always a viable pistol when aiming for the head. But what makes this gun a menace to society and what you really should be worrying about is its right click 3-on burst feature. The burst fire option on the classic has been hit with a nerf hammer many times since the game's launch, yet we are still talking about how problematic it is today. Not to mention, the right click burst is surprisingly accurate while running and jumping, which makes it feel random and tilt inducing at times. I've even seen instances in my own games where the right click burst has one-shot people with armor at close to mid-range. Just one burst that may not even be well aimed at the head, and someone who bought 4,000 credits worth of gear is taken out. Free gun, by the way. From an in-game economy standpoint, the classic can feel kind of broken on pistol rounds because it's a free gun. The fact that it is a free gun helps support agents out specifically, because support agents can keep the classic and buy armor and potentially several abilities, while still having a very strong weapon at close to mid-ranges. Having the ability to be flexible with your buy because the classic is free is great for strategizing and executing said strategies on pistol round. You also have to take into account the fact that if said support agent gets a frag without taking damage, they now have the possibility of picking up a ghost, frenzy, or sheriff while still having light armor and abilities, which literally turns them into a raid boss on pistol round. As a whole, the classic is a super dependable gun, and it's almost too dependable on gun rounds despite it being free and easy to use. The second most low-key OP gun is a close-range powerhouse that some defenders trust more than their rifles, and that's the Judge. The Judge historically has been known for being broken mostly because of how quickly it can get multi-kills in-game. Since the beta, the Judge has been a cornerstone of the close-quarters fighting game in Valorant, and even after several nerfs this year, it still is. The Judge is one of the most frightening guns in Valorant, and we all have had our own experiences where after dying to someone sitting in a dark corner with the Judge, we just wish that we didn't open up Valorant that day. You know there's something wrong when your teammates say, "Don't go into hookah, he's got a Judge," when you have 4 rifles and an AWP. The reason why the Judge creates this kind of interaction between players is due to the fact that the Judge can one-shot to the body easily, which is kind of ridiculous considering how many close-range positions there are like hookah and U-Haul. After its nerfs, it still feels ridiculous to fight against, and people still bring it out when they aren't hitting their rifle shots. The Judge has been nerfed in the past to curtail some of its dominating qualities, but there are 2 things that make the Judge an easy gun to fall back on and abuse. And those 2 things are the ease of securing kills with the Judge at close to mid-range, and the speed at which the Judge automatically fires. The Judge, after its range nerfs, did see less use, but the only thing that changed was that the attacker stopped buying the Judge because it was harder to get in the ideal engagement range for the gun to work. Because of that, the Judge disappeared from the attacking side and mainly saw the bulk of its work reserved for the defenders, who could abuse its close-range power and how easily it could hold close angles. As an automatic shotgun, it's expected that this type of gun will have the ability to tear through enemies like paper. It's only a problem when there's very little counterplay to combat a person playing to the Judge's strengths. Let's be honest, the Judge was nerfed pretty hard in the patch 3.0 update. It got its price increased by a decent amount up to $18.50, and it got its long-range damage decreased around the board. This has prevented the Judge from absolutely dominating anyone on your screen, but it still feels oppressive in a lot of cases, too oppressive for an $18.50 credit gun. The Judge is a gun that is still more viable in the current meta. You can't just run around with it like a fire shotgun in Warzone and expect to delete people at all ranges with it. Before we move on, let's get to our question of the day. Today's question is, what gun do you hate dealing with in-game? Personally, I really hate the shorty. There is no reason why a gun that's so inconsistent can so consistently kill me in games. That is all. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. Let us know what gun you hate facing the most in game in the comment section down below. Now, let's get right back into the video. One gun that everyone loves to complain about but equally loves to abuse is the Spectre. And why is it being abused in this meta? Well, there are 3 words that describe what is wrong with the Spectre, and they are run and gun. The Spectre is problematic in the meta because it has more issues outside of its blatant running and gunning problem. 30 bullets, high fire rate, easily controllable recoil, all for the low price of 1600 credits. Sometimes on save rounds, you can even buy light armor with this gun. There are several reasons for why this gun is so popular, and these are only scratching the surface. So let's address its running and gunning problem first before we talk about what else makes this gun low-key broken. The Spectre breaks one of Valorant's core gameplay rules, and that is you need to counter strafe and stop moving while you're shooting. This creates unhealthy gameplay because since running and gunning is easier with this weapon, players can abuse Peeker's advantage much easier with this gun, which makes dealing with the run and gun situation very annoying and hard. I guess that this gun technically counters the classic, because it's much harder to hit a classic burst on a running target that's tagging you up. But I think we can agree that it's just in general harder to hit a running target that's tagging you constantly. Plus, since we're used to people not swinging a corner without stopping, it can mess with our crosshair placement and adjustments as well, which is a hidden advantage of abusing the Spectre. The core issues that put the Spectre on this list are that its power lies in its accuracy and effectiveness while moving, and its very affordable price. The Spectre is just insanely reliable as a gun. It feels like a breeze to fight against weaker opponents, and it feels very competitive even against fully bought and loaded out enemies. These reasons are built up to why the Spectre is the go-to on the second round buy, but also why the Spectre feels a little unbalanced at times as well. One weapon that a lot of people would debate that it's only OP if it's in the right hands is the Marshal. I think you've all seen just how insane the Marshal can be if you ever watch Tens play with this gun. But I think you've also seen just how useless it is when your teammates force buying on the second round misses like 3 shots and then gets run down. Lower ranked players who don't have consistent aim will not be able to make the Marshal an absolute terror like an Immortal or Radiant can. The Marshal is one of those weapons where it seems useless in a beginner's hands and seems insane in a pro's hands, kind of like the Sheriff. That's why it seems like this gun isn't broken in hindsight. But when you face a player who is experienced with it in game, you'll feel defenseless and struggle to fight against it. Having a gun that costs 950 credits be able to tag for 100 easily and headshot with range advantage and movement speed advantage sounds a little bit crazy. If you are a player with good crosshair placement and can hit headshots consistently, using the Marshal gives you the power of a cheap AWP, with even better mobility and handling stats, which makes it one of the best economy buys for snipers like Jet. Another issue with the Marshal outside of its cheap price is that it also shoots pretty accurately from hipfire, which makes the Marshal a lethal weapon in close quarter situations, which is supposed to be a weakness. Another big upside to the Marshal is that if players lose their armor and get healed, the Marshal will always one-shot to the body, so it's even viable on regular rounds as well. It's no question that the Marshal has been quite strong since the game launched. The only reason why it wasn't dominating the meta was because most players can't use it to its full potential. But as the player base is starting to reach the point where their skill level is capable of using the Marshal as well, I think that the Marshal will eventually need revisiting from the devs to either tone down its tag damage or make some changes to hone in on its specialties and tone down the versatility. To wrap this video up, let's bring up a gun that everyone hates dealing with, and a certain set of agents love using, which is the Odin. I have to start this section off by saying that in reality, the Odin isn't quite overpowered, but it definitely has places where it feels like it's stupid broken, and other situations where even though it's in a bad spot, it feels comparable to a solid rifle. With that being said, this gun is way stronger in lower elos because players have a hard time capitalizing on the small window to punish it, and the gun itself is very good at punishing mistakes. A lesser known fact is that people who don't often use the Odin wouldn't know that the Odin when ADS can hit its max fire rate instantaneously. The Odin normally has a scaling fire rate that gets faster over time, which is one of the few nuances that LMGs have in this game. That means it's at its strongest when holding down an angle. This makes multi-kill spraydowns with the Odin a breeze when in experienced hands. The Odin, like any LMG, will always be aggravating to play against because of its high rate of fire, large ammo capacity, and high bullet penetration, which makes wallbang spraydowns another thing to worry about. Another reason for why the Odin feels broken is because it is especially useful on certain maps with a lot of wallbangable spots. For instance, Haven and Ascent are 2 maps that have many sprayable walls around the map. This means that when a player plays an agent like Sova or Cypher that can spot people behind walls, the Odin is a lot more potent. Finding a way to abuse the Odin with info gathering agents is one of the best agent to weapon combos in the game outside of a Jet with an AWP. The Odin is a very powerful gun that can be abused, but it's not as cut and dry as you think. You're essentially a walking turret when you use this thing, so that will attract a lot of attention to you. If you don't know how to deal with said attention and make the gun shine for you, then you won't be getting the full use out of using this machine gun. With that being said, the Odin is one of those guns that is definitely balanced in some ways, but seems to be a little too easy to use and too strong when playing against inexperienced opponents. Of course, balance is not determined strictly by its performance in low elos, but if it has some insane uses even in higher elos, then it might be time to think just a little bit about how the gun can be made to represent skill a bit better. Well guys, that's all we have for 5 guns that are low-key broken right now. If you did enjoy, do make sure to leave a like and subscribe. Don't forget to visit our website ProGuides.com for the very best courses and top-ranked coaches. This has been your host Sergeant Frost, and I'll see you all again in the next one.